Right. So today we're going to be looking into Taylor Lorenz.
Yeah.
And, you've sent us a ton of stuff about her articles, tweets, even a whole book on a viral movement she helped start.
This is quite a lot.
Yeah. I mean, she is clearly a fascinating figure.
Oh, for sure.
So on Grifter or Gifted, that's what we try to figure out, right?
Right.
Is she a visionary journalist who's bravely pushing boundaries in this crazy, changing media landscape?
Mm-hmm.
Or is she, as some of her critics say, a reckless instigator who's more focused on self-promotion than on, responsible reporting?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it?
Let's dive into her story.
Okay.
See what we can uncover.
Sounds good.
So who is Taylor Lorenz?
Well, she's got a very interesting background. I mean, from traditional media, you've got the Daily Mail, the Atlantic, the New York Times.
Big names.
Big names, exactly. And then she moved over to being a tech and internet culture columnist at the Washington Post.
Right.
So she's really built a name for herself covering digital culture, internet trends, kind of translating what's happening online for a wider audience.
Yeah, she's really good at explaining those really complicated corners of the internet.
Absolutely.
Like bringing it to people who might not even know they exist.
Yeah.
But she has also kind of become a lightning rod, right?
Yeah.
Attracting praise and criticism.
Seems like you can't have one without the other these days.
Yeah, for her approach.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of that controversy.
Okay, let's get into it.
So walk us through it.
So there was that doxing incident involving the Libs of TikTok account creator.
Ah, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Big one. So for anyone who needs a refresher on what doxing is, it's when someone's personal information is publicly revealed.
Right.
Often with bad intentions.
Yeah, definitely not a good thing.
Not a good thing.
So what happened there?
Well, there were ethical concerns about her revealing the identity of the woman behind the account, Chaya Raichik.
Right.
And what really stood out was that Lorenz actually went to the houses of Raichik's family members.
Oh.
Yeah. And then later she removed that detail from her story without telling anyone.
Without telling readers.
Yeah, which, again, raised some serious questions about journalistic transparency.
That's not good.
Not good.
Okay, so then there was also that Instagram photo incident.
Oh, yeah, with President Biden.
President Biden in the background.
In the background, and she captioned it, "You people will fall for any dumbass edit someone makes."
The internet loved that.
They did.
Yeah, so what happened there?
Well, Lorenz initially denied writing the caption. Then she admitted to sharing the image with the caption in a private chat.
Oh, really?
And then ultimately she claimed she was just repeating an online meme.
Like a joke.
Yeah, like a joke.
Okay, so it seems like she kind of got caught
Yeah.
in a lie.
Yeah, and so this, of course, led to a lot of accusations of her blurring the lines between reporting and activism.
Right.
Is she a journalist or is she an activist?
Right. And is it okay to be both?
That's a big question.
It's a big question.
And then on top of all this, she also has a history of clashing online, public feuds.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with people on the right.
Right.
So again, this kind of adds to that idea of, is she a neutral journalist?
Or is she, in the middle of the fight?
Or part of the story?
Yeah, okay. So she definitely is controversial.
Oh, for sure.
But let's look at the other side.
Okay.
The arguments that actually support what she's doing.
Okay, so
her journalistic practices.
Yeah.
What do people say?
Well, one thing is that she's undeniably brought attention to some very important issues related to online culture.
Like what kind of stuff?
Harassment, misinformation, the rise of influencer culture.
Right.
All very important things that are affecting our society.
Right. And things that traditional media might not have been covering.
Absolutely.
Or might not be as familiar with.
Yeah, and she has a way of explaining these things that makes them accessible to people who might not be familiar with them.
Right, like explaining the internet to your grandma. Okay, so she's shining a light on these issues.
Yeah, and a lot of people praise her for that.
Okay.
They say she's giving a voice to the voiceless.
That's a big claim.
It is, but she's definitely making people think about these issues.
Okay, so gifted journalist?
Potentially.
Okay, and then we got to look at the flip side.
Yeah, reckless grifter.
Yeah.
So what do the critics say?
What are the main criticisms?
Well, aside from the doxing accusations,
right,
there are concerns about her journalistic ethics.
Like what kind of things?
Like, does she prioritize self-promotion over accuracy?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is, yeah.
Because that's kind of what it seems like.
Yeah, and her online presence, that really combative style, it's not helping.
Always getting into these online feuds.
Yeah, and it kind of feeds into that narrative of her being this reckless instigator.
Right. Okay, so we've got gifted journalist on the one hand, reckless grifter on the other.
It's a very interesting dichotomy.
It is. So how does the whole birds aren't real thing fit into this?
Oh, that's a great example of how she's always interested in these online communities.
Okay.
And she actually covered this extensively in her book, Birds Aren't Real: The True Story of Mass Avian Murder and the Largest U.S. History Campaign in History.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah,
There's a whole book about birds not being real.
there is.
Okay, I got to hear more about this.
It's actually more insightful than you might think.
Okay.
So the Birds Aren't Real movement
Okay.
is a Gen Z-led thing,
I like
and
that.
it's satire.
Okay.
It's like they're satirizing all these conspiracy theories
Okay.
by claiming that birds are actually government drones.
That's hilarious.
It is kind of funny.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is that Lorenz uses this to explore all these anxieties
Right.
about information in the digital age, distrust of authority, and how the lines between irony and genuine belief can get really blurry online.
Yeah, because there are people who genuinely believe some of this stuff.
Yeah, and so it's hard to tell what's real and what's not.
Right. And that's something that Lorenz has always been interested in.
Right.
Like, how do we even know what's true anymore?
Yeah, in this world of misinformation and disinformation.
Okay, so the birds aren't real thing is actually a really clever way to explore all of that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so then she makes another big move.
She does.
She decides to leave the Washington Post
Yeah.
and pursue independent journalism.
It was a bold move.
It was a bold move.
Yeah.
Why do you think she did that?
Well, she said she wanted to be free from the constraints of traditional media.
Oh, so she wants to be able to report on whatever she wants
Pretty much.
without having to answer to anybody.
Yeah, and she felt like she couldn't do that at the Washington Post.
Okay, so is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's a mixed bag.
Okay.
On the one hand, it gives her more freedom,
Right.
but on the other hand, it also means that she's not accountable to anyone.
Right. So she could potentially just go off the rails.
Yeah, and that's what some of her critics are worried about.
Right. Okay, so it's a risky move, but it's also potentially very rewarding. And it really speaks to this larger trend we're seeing of journalists moving away from these big institutions.
Yes, and it's making people question the future of journalism as a whole.
So is this the future of news?
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say.
But it's definitely something to watch.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about who Taylor Lorenz is.
Sure.
We've talked about some of the controversies surrounding her.
Yeah.
And we've talked about some of the arguments for and against her style of journalism.
A lot to unpack.
It is. So where do we go from here?
Well, to really understand if she's a gifted journalist or a reckless grifter, we need to look at some specific examples of her work.
All right. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's dive in.
Let's start with that Libs of TikTok story,
Okay.
because that seems to be where things really blew up for her.
Yeah. For better or worse.
For better or for worse.
That's where it all began.
Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. The Libs of TikTok story is a good one to really dive into.
Okay.
It kind of sums up the whole Taylor Lorenz thing.
Right.
So the account itself shared content from like liberal TikTok creators, often in a way that people saw as like mocking or trying to make them look bad.
Yeah, it definitely caused a lot of strong reactions online.
Oh, yeah.
And Lorenz's article, the one where she like revealed who was running the account,
Chaya Raichik.
Chaya Raichik, that really like blew the whole thing up.
Yeah, it brought it into the mainstream media.
And her reporting, we looked at how that account was influencing like right-wing media and even politics.
Yeah.
And some people say that that was really important to expose that.
Absolutely.
Like to understand how these online platforms can be used to spread like divisive content.
Right.
To like target specific people.
Yeah, and how something that starts on TikTok can actually have real world consequences.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
But on the other hand, you've got the critics
Right.
who say that revealing Raichik's identity was basically doxing.
Which is bad.
Yeah, which is bad, and it could put her in danger.
Right, like online harassment or even real world threats.
Exactly, and they felt like Lorenz went too far.
Especially because she went to the houses of Raichik's family.
Yeah, that was a bit much.
It did seem like an invasion of privacy.
Like almost like she's trying to intimidate them.
Right, and Lorenz, she defended her reporting.
Of course.
She said that Raichik was like a public figure because of the account.
Right.
And that she had a lot of real world influence. She also said that she tried to contact Raichik like through other ways.
Yeah, like email or social media.
Before going to her family's houses.
But still, it just didn't look good.
Yeah, the optics were bad.
Yeah, it just made Lorenz look like she was willing to do whatever it took to get the story.
Right, even if it meant crossing ethical lines.
Exactly. And that kind of stuck with her.
Yeah, like people started to view all of her work through that lens.
Like, is she always going too far?
Right. Is she more interested in causing drama than in being a responsible journalist?
And then you've got the Instagram photo with Biden
Oh, yeah.
that just added fuel to the fire.
Because it played into that narrative that was already out there about her judgment.
Yeah, and her, like, provocative online behavior.
Right. And it shows how, like, one little comment
Mm-hmm.
can turn into this huge controversy.
Especially when you're someone like Lorenz who's already in the spotlight.
Right. It's like the internet never forgets.
No.
And speaking of the internet,
Yeah.
she left the Washington Post
Huge move.
to do independent journalism.
What do you think about that?
I don't know. Is this her, like, leaning into the grifter label?
Possibly.
Like she's rejecting the establishment?
Yeah, she's going rogue.
Going rogue?
Doing her own thing.
So is this good or bad?
Well, it gives her more freedom.
Right, she can report on whatever she wants.
Exactly. But it also means there's no accountability.
So she could just go totally crazy.
She could.
And some people are worried about that.
Definitely.
But it's also a really smart move in a way.
How so?
Because, like, the media landscape is changing.
It is.
And she's kind of ahead of the curve.
Yeah, she's adapting.
Adapting, and she's betting on herself.
Yeah, that she can build an audience without a big news organization behind her.
That's a big gamble.
It is.
But it could pay off big time.
It could.
And it makes you think about the future of journalism.
Yeah, like, are we all going to be getting our news from individual people?
Rather than these big institutions,
It's a possibility.
it's a possibility. And is that good or bad?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. And we haven't even talked about the age thing.
Oh, yeah.
When she said she was 50 online,
That was weird.
yeah, it was obviously a joke,
Right.
but it blew up.
Yeah, people took it seriously.
And it just shows how quickly misinformation can spread
Especially online.
and how, like, even small things can be used against you.
Yeah, if people already think you're untrustworthy.
Right, just adds to that perception,
And it shows that everything you put online can come back to haunt you.
even if you're just kidding.
It's all part of your online identity.
So it all comes back to that question we're trying to answer,
Grifter or gifted?
right? And Taylor Lorenz really makes us think about that
She does.
because she's both charismatic and controversial.
Yeah, she's a walking contradiction.
And how we see her might say more about us,
Than about her.
right? Like what we value in a journalist,
Exactly.
what we think is important.
And how we consume information.
It's like she's holding up a mirror.
To our own biases.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she's this puzzle, you can't quite figure her out.
Exactly. And her move to independent journalism. I mean, what does that even mean for the future of news?
It's a big question.
Are we all going to be getting our news from, like, individual personalities?
It's possible.
Like building their own brands and, like, talking directly to their audience?
It's a whole new world.
Yeah, like, are we going to see more journalists going that route?
I think so.
Or is there going to be this, like, swing back
So interesting.
to, like, traditional values of journalism?
Yeah, like objectivity and verification.
Yeah, that stuff.
Yeah, like a return to the basics.
It's a crossroads for sure.
It is. And Taylor Lorenz is right there in the middle of it.
Whether she's leading the way or,
Or a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
It's up for debate.
So where do you stand
Yeah, what do you think?
after this deep dive into the world of Taylor Lorenz?
Grifter or gifted?
Or maybe somewhere in between?
Yeah, what's your verdict?
And what does her story tell you about the state of media today?
That's the big question.
It is, how do we consume information? Who do we trust? How do we even know what's true anymore?
It's a lot to think about.
It is. All right, well, this has been Grifter or Gifted.
It has.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and complicated world of Taylor Lorenz.
Always a pleasure.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep asking those tough questions.
See you next time.